All right, Mr. P back with oh gosh, what is this now? Lesson number 9. So we are in our 9th video. We're almost done the series, and this was supposed to be in the last video, but time permit. So I'll cover this in this video. So this is going to take us somewhat of a sidebar, but I want to emphasize the range of Black political and ideological thought at the time. Hopefully the Washington and Du Bois debates highlighted that for you. But during the early 1900s, Black communities, like any community, do not agree on everything. Do not, have a diversity of ideology, a diversity of political thought, a diversity of how to fight against white supremacy. So we're seeing that in these political cartoons here. So you can see. So actually, maybe take a pause and pause the video before I start explaining some things, and just try and observe some things about the video, about the political cartoons. What are you noticing, right, in these cartoons? What themes do you notice? These two were published next to each other in a Black socialist newspaper called The Messenger by Black labor organizers A. Philip Randolph and Chandler Owen. And you can take a look and see what they're trying to convey. The first cartoon is called Following the Advice of the Old Crowd Negro. And then the second one is called New Crowd Negro, Making America Safe for Himself. What message is being conveyed? What visual evidence do you have for that? What do you think A. Philip Randolph and Chandler Owen are advocating for with the message of these political cartoons? So pause, do that yourself, do some writing in your notebook on this, and then play it and listen to kind of my thoughts. Okay, so hopefully you did that. Took a sip of water, helped my voice here. All right, so the first political cartoon, you might have noticed 3 Black figures here, each with a quote, and you'll notice white mob violence. Okay, well, the response from these figures, this is Booker T. Washington, the Atlanta Compromise speech. He said, and this is a quote from him, "Be modest and unassuming." Right? So in the face of racist mob violence, Booker T. Washington's response, try to not get attention paid to you, right? Du Bois's response here, close ranks, let us forget our grievances. This is a response during the war. Basically, Du Bois advocates for Black men to join World War I, and they do, right? Hundreds of thousands of Black men join the war effort. So Du Bois says, let's join the war to prove, right, just like during the Civil War, to prove our worthiness of respect. And then here you can see the collar. This is a Black minister. When they smite thee on one cheek, turn the other. So you might gather that Randolph and Owen are not happy about these 3 responses from Black leaders at the time, right? So these are Randolph and Owen, as Black socialists, argue Black people need to fight for themselves. Don't be modest and unassuming. Don't close ranks. There's nothing you're going to get white people to do to respect you by fighting in a war. You need to make America safe for yourself. So we have here the New Crowd Negro article or cartoon basically says Black folks are going to take care of themselves. They are going to protect themselves. And so you have here, right, folks arming themselves. Since the government won't stop mob violence, I'll take a hand. They're arming themselves, right? That you have giving the Hun a dose of his own medicine, referring to white people as barbaric. And so you have an effort here to fight back. This is in 1919, by the way. I forgot to put that on here. So this is during the Red Summer, which we talked about in a previous video. And we talked about how Black veterans, World War I veterans, were arming themselves to defend themselves against mob violence. So that is present during this time period. the defense of one's own community. I can't emphasize that enough. And so Randolph is supporting that. Owen is supporting that. And we will learn more about A. Philip Randolph when we look at the civil rights movement, because we will do a little bit of looking at the Black labor organizing and interracial organizing in labor that was part of the predecessor to the civil rights movement. But for now, I just want to emphasize the range of political and ideological thought and the disagreements within the Black community. No one racial community is ever a monolith. I think we all know that. So the last thing here is that Randolph, the next year, 1920, they publish a manifesto called The New Negro, What Is He? And they lay out 3 aims, goals. This is in 1920, right? But you're going to notice the continuity of demands all the way up through the civil rights movement and the Black Power movements. So political goal. The new Negro, unlike the old Negro, cannot be lulled into a false sense of security with political spoils and patronage. So basically arguing that Black folks should fight for their own political power and not accept that white leadership is going to secure freedom for them. Economic power, the immediate aim is more wages, shorter hours, and better working conditions. That's something that white workers, Chinese workers, Chicano workers have been fighting for this entire time. And they published that in this manifesto. Social, he stands for absolute and unequivocal social equality, right? Like an end to Jim Crow segregation, that type of thing. Right? This is a socialist manifesto, but these aims don't look that socialist to us, I would assume. Right? Socialism referring to, and I guess I should mention here a little bit about that. Right? There's a tradition of Black socialism that grows out of the Marxist tradition, which is a understanding that in order to ensure freedom and security and economic prosperity for everyone, we have to move away from capitalism, which we talked about as a cause of imperialism, right? That capitalism is designed so that a handful get very rich off of the exploitation of a large group of workers or farmers. Or, during slavery, enslaved labor. And the aim of socialism is to try and get power out of the hands of the capitalist elite. And there's, different ways that socialism tries to do that. One kind of communist approach would be a collective ownership, right? Worker co-ops. So this is one track of socialism, is let's have workers own the factories collectively, as opposed to one factory owner who makes money, who makes all the profits. That's one approach. The other approach is let's have government redistribute and secure some rights and equity for workers. So, socialism has a few different ways in which it tries to, right? And then today you're probably familiar with democratic socialism, which is more of the Bernie Sanders and AOC side of things. Right, using government as a vehicle for trying to redistribute wealth through, providing social services. The United States, like most countries, have mixed economies. They have some social security, Medicare and Medicaid, workers' comp. All of these things are socialist policies that grew out of worker organizing. So it is important to recognize that, socialism and capitalism do blend in our current economy. But socialist organizing tends to try and push the socialist aspect even further. And we have a tradition of Black socialism with A. Philip Randolph and Owen here articulating that. The next publication of this manifesto actually made it even more explicitly socialist, arguing that labor is the common denominator of the working class of the world, exploitation the common denominator of oppression, Grievance that new Negroes had grievances against those who profit from the present system, which operates against the interests of all workers. They use the language of a working class against a capitalist class a little bit more in the second iteration of this. But they also advocate for self-defense, that to fight back in self-defense, right? Not to initiate violence, but to use self-defense to defend oneself should be accepted as a matter of course. So we see self-defense emerge as early as the early 1900s, right? Especially during the Red Summer of 1919. So the next video is going to get to the Harlem Renaissance. So I'm going to end this video early. I guess one thing one more thing I wanted to mention that I don't have on here, but you can look up. During this time, there is a migration of Caribbean folks moving to the United States. Marcus Garvey is one of them from Jamaica, and he advocates for a Pan-African, back to Africa kind of form of Black nationalism, which some people embrace. Actually, Malcolm X's father embraced it, and that's part of the tradition that Malcolm X grew up in. So it's important to recognize, right, the range, right? Some folks were like, no, we don't want to eventually move to Africa. We want to have, stay in the United States and that kind of thing. So you have a range of Black political thought, and I just want to emphasize that, right? These conversations and disagreements are robust and healthy in many ways, right? It's important to have a variety of ideologies. All right, so you can end this video and come back for our one of the final videos on the Harlem Renaissance.